if that moves around, that whole sentence suddenly shifts around. Different languages have really different rules of where to place words, how to put them in order. German with 3 verbs can have somewhere at the beginning, somewhere in the middle, something at the end. It's very, very intriguing sometimes. Like I said, I'm German, so it's so much of it is out of practice or out of experience, seeing as little things. These are just basic recommendations or thinking about when you prepare your files. Using paragraph styles, not line spacing. Do not use carriage returns to go to the next page. For example, in MS Word. We see that in small letters where they want to have a separate page, next paragraph, next page. Use sections, use page breaks. Again, it's basic little things that you're probably all aware of, and sometimes just out of quickness, just get it done. During DTP, we might just change it. Question? Oh. Okay. We might change it so it works with the target language. Or you're just cutting it down because you do not want to have 10 carriage returns on the top of the page, because the target language, again, is a little longer, and suddenly you have that whole space issue. We might just put in, or we might just delete the carriage returns and put in a page break. It's a little freedom that we sometimes take with small files. With big files, if we do that, we have to let you know. There's no something in the dark, or change something here. The other part is auto-numbering for list sections, leave space for expansions. Think about it. Think also about when you're writing. If you're writing text like, see the image at the bottom of the page. Again, due to expansion of text, it might not work for the target language because the page might already be on the next page. Suddenly, that reference is lost in the target language. The other example would be tables that are sorted alphabetically. The question is, do you want those sorted also in the target language? It's a quick doable, of course it's doable. The thing is then, if somebody now starts comparing the English to the target language and tries to find something, oh, second line in the English is suddenly not the second line in the target language anymore. It sounds simple, but you have to be aware of it. We had one example where we had exercises for a simulator in English. Here the 20 next exercises for the simulator alphabetically. Next 20 pages frame maker. The question is, do you want those sorted in the target language just because they are alphabetically? Or do you want to have them aligned so if somebody looks at the target language, might not necessarily understand what is there, compares it to the English? Where does he find it? So he now has to look and think about what might be the English wording for it. It's a question we can ask you. For that example, we took out alphabetically. See the next 20 pages, next 20 examples for simulation. It's just deleting one word and saving about 2 hours per language, resorting 20 pages. But of course, if you need it alphabetically, then we'll stick to it. Other things, Jocelyn mentioned it shortly, language details. You need to know what your target requirements are. Date format changes, Europe usually goes day, month, year. Measurements, currency, numeric delimiters. You know about the satellite that blew up because the English used a different decimal separator. It's vital while you're writing it. It's vital when somebody reads it. It's a difference between a 1.000 and 1,000. You have already the issue if you go into Canada. Canada French prefers a decimal comma. Canada English prefers the decimal point. Within one country, they can't even decide that. So it's a little, yeah. Double byte characters is one thing, usually minor. Directions, meaning left to right writings, right to left writings. The tools we use for translation usually support nearly any language. The question is, and we've done it for one client, we did a whole manual via data files into Arabic, or actually Hebrew, but the same outcome. They wanted to put it back in their, I think, Oxygen, and it didn't work because their tool didn't support the right to left. And my mistake, we didn't ask. It was a few years ago. Again, it changes our procedure. We are asking, where do you use it? Does your tool support actually right to left? Just because somebody told you we need it now in Arabic, doesn't mean it works in Arabic. So it's, again, use us to do a QA on your files. Use the translators to do a QA on your files. That's basically some of the things that we like to emphasize when we're doing work with any technical writer and any partner. We consider actually partners, not necessarily just looking at something else. Okay, well, my files, good. Getting there. The last thing, again, is language requirements. Some of it might already be done via your regulatory. You might need to know that your target country has different requirements. So you might have to rewrite your whole file. Some of it you might only see when you get your in-country reviewer getting the feedback. And the feedback is usually a 3-tier step. The first is just style and terminology, which can be quickly changed. Terminology sometimes, if you're new to the language, you might just use a different term that your in-country reviewer who is more familiar with the product might not want, and they change it. Again, that's an easy fix. The second in-country review feedback form can be that they're changing your procedure slightly. Different order, different, just changing the wording to a certain point. That is then a discussion between you and your country. Do you want to allow it? Some companies cannot change the source and cannot change the target. It has to match one-to-one. Here in the States, it's the FDA that doesn't allow anything. If you want to change that order, that whole manual has to go back and do the whole FDA approval again. For the target country, if you agree with it, okay, we'll change it. The third part, different product, is where one example would be you're selling a product with subcomponents that are not in that country. Suddenly that country decides, we do not need half your book, and they just scratch it out. Happens a lot in Japan, for whatever reason, but it's a reality. And suddenly you are forced to rewrite, to a certain point, your English for Japan. You have a separate manual. Now, if you're using the older forms, FrameMaker, InDesign, you have to more or less start and take out what is not needed to create it. Newer forms that we see a lot, slowly also in our side, we'll deal with it a lot, is changing it to an XML single source format, where you pull things out, you mark it once, okay, this is for Japan, you pull it back into your cloud, and the moment you need it, you pull it back out. It should make life a lot easier on your side. Instead of having one manual for Europe, one manual in English, I mean, one manual for Europe, one manual US, one manual Asia, one manual Latin America. This way you have it at least prepared, set up in your database, and can pull it out and make the small corrections instead of going through the whole thing for each single language. Because if you're changing one paragraph in the English, you have to make sure that you're changing it in all your subsequent English for the other countries. So it's challenging. Challenging on all sides. And again, that's where we can help. We cannot help you creating that specific target language because we do not know. We are translating the English the way we see it, the way we understand it, or the way you help us understanding it. Good. That basically is what we've talked about. Any initial questions? Yeah. Start that front, sorry.
You mentioned FrameMaker.
Yeah.
Somehow FrameMaker seems to throw in a carriage return or /n break. I've seen that when I generate on help. So do you prefer your clients using MIF files that you review?
Well, we convert all the FrameMaker to MIF on our side anyway, because most tools do not work directly with FrameMaker. So they're MIF files. And yes, there are a few tweaks. /n is usually actually preferred because it's a text format. The translator sees it and knows what it is. Or we go in and, again, back to the busy slide, we can half protect that /n so the translator can still move it around, but sees it should not be changed. What makes our life a lot more difficult is hard returns. Soft returns, we can take them out. The problem is then they're out in the translation. So if you have a whole block just with soft returns, the translation suddenly is just one long sentence. That's where the DTP comes in, but at least the translator sees the whole segment and can translate the whole segment. Second question.
One thing I've noticed, the biggest cost for translation is images, text inside images.
Yeah.
Because you have to go into the image, expand, I guess you have to expand the text box, put the text in there, and then sometimes you may have to rearrange things to fit texts on the image. So
Yeah.
I found that is, that's the biggest expense.
Images.
Is there any tips you can give us for how to handle images better?
Don't use flat images. You use a tool that creates layered images where you can actually have the text outside or actually accessible. If you just have a flat image, then we sort of have to do some workaround to get your English text out of it, which is already difficult enough, especially if you have a gradient background. If you have a single color background, well, you take it out, you fill it in, and you put the text back in. You can do that with Paint, MS Paint as a basic tool. The moment you have a gradient in the background, taking out that text is a lot more difficult because then you start playing around and you have to fake some of it and you have to fill it back in. Putting the text back in afterwards, it's just a copy and paste from the source and making sure the formatting works. Photoshop, PNG files, EPS files are usually the ones that have that text layer. If you don't have it, then a lot can be faked.
So put all the text in a separate layer?
Yes, yes.
And is there a way to like, we use Illustrator for images,
Yeah.
Is there a way to export a layer of text and bring it back in with the translated text or something?
You just copy and paste. It's just, I haven't seen any direct tool that does it from Illustrator files. There might be one out there, but a good question actually. I don't know one. Just for a moment. I'll go back. Usually what we do is really a copy and paste. Going from copy it out of it, translate it in a basic table file, and put it back in. It's a lot easier than working from the images. This way the translator has it and we have it in translation memory by segment. Okay, sorry, yes.
So he and I were talking about this very issue. And both of our groups use either numbers or letters to replace the callouts where we have a table below, where the actual callout text is in one of the rows.
Yeah.
That seems to work very good.
It's preferable. If, again, I've seen that same thing nicely done in a real table where you have it separated. I have also seen done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1 to 6 via tabs. The translator sees 1 and 6 in one line. But again, they see the PDF, they know there are separate segments, and there's nothing underneath that they need to know. But yes, this is usually the better way, a better practice of putting numbers into an image and have it explained underneath. This way you also have the chance to change it later. If you make a terminology change in the English, you can correct it there. Yeah, thank you very much for that example. So far, anything else? Yeah.
You mentioned earlier about differences in approach for doing a new project, a whole project versus maintenance. That's one of the things that I've encountered difficulty with is, you know, it's relatively straightforward to do a brand new project, to have it localized, because you can start with fresh translation memory and you know, project from the ground up. But if you're doing maintenance on a project, let's say that you inherited, you have to make those balances between how much do you change and track your changes and so forth.
Yeah.
So when your clients are sending you information for tracking what changed, do you have any recommendations for best practices on how to manage that?
It's what Jocelyn calls the top-down and bottom-up approach. Top-down is we're starting from scratch with a new file, go all the way through, sending everything out. Bottom-up is where we have an existing translation, your previous project, for example, and you're making small adjustments. The question at that point is how many adjustments. If they're localized to one chapter, we would just translate that chapter new, go back, put it back into your old files, make sure all the cross-references are there correctly, and without having to redo the whole thing, because there's no point in it. If you haven't changed anything there, there's no need for the translation or for a new project. The thing where it's getting gray is if you're making changes, a single word change on every second page. Half a sentence here, half a paragraph deletions here. It doesn't look much. You have a list of 50, 60 small changes in 200 pages. The question is, A, we have to find it. Your track changes might not necessarily fit it all. Going back to, for example, FrameMaker has a comparison tool where we can sort of extract it by a whole segment, translate it, and try to put it back in manually, line by line, language by language. If you're using a newer form, DITA, XML, where you know what you're changing and you put that out, you can only send us that change, for example, instead of the whole file. This is again where single sourcing, we suggest some of our clients, or a lot of our clients, where they have a lot of separate files, where they have, to a certain point, the same text in one. If they're not updating it there, it might not be correct in the other one. So it's doable. It is a discussion. It's a gray area to a certain point where you go in. The DTP team usually prefers a full DTP. Management, accounting usually prefers the small amount. So we have to meet somewhere in between to make it work on both sides. Yes, thank you.
I'm updating some online help, trying to translate it into 11 languages. At the same time, I decided that I should use a newer, better style sheet. So most of my changes are just style sheet changes. Is that going to be a problem?
Using the tool would give a penalty on different formatting. The text is identical.
It is.
The text is identical. So it is, from our perspective, it is not a full new translation. If you're using one of those translation tools, it will give you a list of changes from the previous one. It's a gradient from 50%, 70%. Formatting changes is usually done as a penalty 1 to 2%.
So it will cost us money.
It will cost you money, unfortunately, yes. It should not cost you. You should see a word count. Back then, you should see a word count, you should see a review count, and you should see a total count. That translation count should not be anywhere near. If you have a translation memory, you haven't changed anything.
Well, there are minor updates, but
okay, but still,
so those I couldn't avoid.
Yeah, no,
The style
well,
changes.
yes, of course, but it's again those minor changes again, the total count should not be anywhere near your translation count when you get the cost analysis from whoever you're using. That is the main thing, where you know you haven't changed a lot. Those little things, there's a certain amount of what the translators usually can do or can help you with that style change, because they see it line by line. Again, you see it there. The previous style is in translation memory.
Apply different CSS.
Yeah. Well, if you apply a different CSS and you're not changing anything in your HTML files, then that is 100% match. To my view, that is 100% match in translation. If you're not changing anything to
No,
that,
just a different CSS file.
the CSS files we do not really care about when you translate.
I was hoping you would say that.
Good, thank you.
Well, but isn't there potentially, if you like changed class names, CSS class names, that's still, you know, those class names are changing, like your character styles or your paragraph styles or your character styles change. You become more specific, or you decide to make variations on a table or something.
Well, actually, this may be a little more complicated, because this is originally a RoboHelp file that I had to import into Claire.
Mm-hmm.
It looks perfectly horrible.
Right.
And so this is why I decided to apply the new CSS. It now looks lovely, but
Right.
It is the question. We were asked at one point, well, if we have it in InDesign and now we have it in FrameMaker, or we have it from FrameMaker to InDesign, the text is identical, it shouldn't be translated twice. Well, it is per se not translated twice because the text is in the translation memory, but the formatting around the InDesign looks a little different than in FrameMaker. But again, if you're not changing in the HTML anything, and only changing the CSS,
yes.
then I'm not looking at the CSS. There's nothing in it for me to translate. So if that CSS supports your target language, then I would just suggest go in and try whatever you have in your target language and see how it looks before you send it off for translation. Not too helpful, but at least if you're not changing anything in the text, to my perspective, as a project manager, there shouldn't be any translation for it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Good. Then I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just a quick reminder that we are sponsoring happy hour this evening. So those that want to join us, I believe it starts at 6 at the Old Court Irish Pub. You're welcome to join us for beverages at that time. If you have additional questions, or at any point in time, you have a project that's thrust upon you, or you're sitting in the mire of one right now, and you'd like to give us a call and get some technical help, we'd be happy to advise. We'd be happy to take a look at your files and run analyses on those, and throw some numbers back at you and say, well, here's what we'd be looking at for translation review, layout, image work. We'll try to get some specific information on different image tools if we can come across some that would be helpful for that. And anytime we're a resource for you. And if you have opportunity, talk to John Amato here, who fortunately took us on under his wing about a year ago for a major project, and we delivered it faster than expected and cheaper than expected. So please ask him for his preference and testimony. And if you have questions, like I said, at any point in time while we're around, feel free to just to probe. Again, thank you again for your time this morning. We appreciate it. Take care.